Hi guys, Mr. Jaeger here, and welcome back to Company of Heroes 3 for the long overdue summary episode. So, Company of Heroes 3 is done. I got my original amount of money's worth, and yeah, oh boy. So before I go on, I'm going to say this. First of all, it's been quite a while since I last played the game, in terms of the campaign. It's that my opinions and voices is coming from a much more calm and understanding perspective rather than just finished the game and is fuming like I was when I was recording it. Second, a number of things have come through which is obviously at the time wasn't around. For example, the DLC that's just dropped, but it's going to be a good point to mention in comparison to and whatever. And finally, these are my own thoughts. If you disagree with them, feel free to put them in the comment section down below. I really would like to hear your thoughts on it, because for me, Company of Heroes 3 is kind of like the last sort of gasp of a series that really started out fantastic, and then just through poor decision making and bad and trend chasing, just ended up falling apart at the end, and frankly is an insult to its heritage. Just in my personal opinion, though there are good bits about it, I won't lie about that. Gameplay footage, by the way, is me playing the Spearhead mod, so you don't have to watch it, it's just a thing I'm playing in the background, but you can watch it if you want, so I hope you enjoy that at least. So yes, without further ado, let's get started. So, off we start with a little talk about the German campaign, and I say little with optimism. So I'm going to break it down into two sections. First of all, the narrative, and then second of all, the gameplay. So the narrative of the German campaign. Spoilers, by the way, if you are somehow remotely interested in playing the single-player campaign. It feels so empty in comparison to previous games. Like, there is almost zero characters that you can actually interact with, or that you feel that you're part of the story on. So, like, literally, the only characters we really get is a tribal that joins the Allied cause and is constantly talking about how powerful the Germans are and how, how desperate things are getting. And then you get the game announcer, or Rommel, and I'm going to call him the game announcer because literally all he does throughout the entire campaign, from completing mission objectives to giving us briefings, he just tells you what's going on and what he wants to do. And then if you're doing well, he'll say, yes, we're doing amazing. And if we're not doing so well, we're like, verdammt! But that's about it. There's no humanity at all with any of the other characters. There's no German officer trying to deal with his moral duty versus his morals. There's no guy who's, like the clichéic stuff. Not even anything clichéic. Like, there are parts in the campaign, both happening in this single player, in the linear campaign, and in the Italian campaign, where they force these really just undeserved moments where characters say something to sort of sound a bit risque, but you absolutely do not deserve any level of respect at that point that they try them. And you end up going, what was that all about? Like, really? And the fact that they drop it as well, like, as much as they try and bring it in, they drop it at the same time. It just feels so detached and sanitized. And one of the things that frankly pissed me off was the fact that we didn't get a single bit, the single bit of anything from a German soldier from the time in the actual point. Like, the story could have been so much more fleshed out. It could be a journal like they do in the actual Italian campaign, talking about how they built themselves up to be they're originally just a small ragtag group of men turning into the most dangerous weapon in the desert force, blah, blah, blah. You could do that. You could also do a story of a man struggling with his duty and seeing the war affecting him. Like, you could do those cliche things, but they don't. They just go for the same. It honestly just feels like generic Army A is doing well against generic Army B. And what I mean by the undeserved sort of moment is, again, spoilers, at one point in the campaign, which, by the way, I'm just going to have a little bit of a tangent here. Throughout the campaign, the tribal goes off to join the Allies, and he talks constantly about how he's having problems and they're struggling against the Germans. He still gets messages and letters from his daughter from a German-occupied town, and I'm like, I don't think they would let people do that, or at least I don't think they would let them talk as much about that stuff as they would do. Like the amount of information that she's relaying to the guy in the letters, that's not something that would get through the censors. I'm sorry. It just doesn't quite roll like that. I know it makes a great, storyline piece, but it really doesn't. No. Oh, good God. So either A, they have absolutely no idea what kind of period this was in and how information would have been very much more controlled back then, or they just don't care. And I'm wondering if it's the two. And to be honest with you, you could feel that they didn't really want to make this campaign. You could feel that I got a warning from it when you were watching when we were watching the trailers before the actual game came out. Like, there was a game trailer, talking about the German campaign, and like throughout the bloody trailer, when they were talking about it, you can feel the reluctance and the amount of times he kept saying, you are still playing the bad guys. It's like, yes, I know you're playing a World War II game and the Germans are the bad guys. We have this game is rated 18. If you are reaching the age of 18 to be able to legally play this game and you still don't know who the bad guys were in World War II, that is an educational failure system of the system. It's a failure of either A, your ineptitude to learning how to do that, or the school that you were going to didn't seem to want to say who the bad guys were because they're terrified of offending someone. Who knows? But the point is, come the fuck on. We're not that stupid. Anyway, so having this moment where, in the campaign, where that isn't deserved, there is a part where the town that the tribal family is living in is bombed by the British, and the daughter sends a message saying, "Why are they bombing us? It's not fair." And it's like, why are they doing this? Don't they realize? And it's like this moment where it's like, oh. But at no point does, the father go, well, hang on a second. This is my family. Why are you attacking me? Like, there's no fucking mention of it. Like, there's no point where he questions his loyalty to the British forces and has a go at the officers and stuff. None of that. It's almost like he just shrugs and go, well, that be the problem. And it's just like, what the fuck? Oh, Christ. And when it happens, again, it just comes out of the blue, and it doesn't feel deserved. You don't feel any connection to the characters, the story, the evolution. It's like I felt more connection with the soldiers from Trun in Tales of Valor. The guy who you don't see his face, you don't see anything, but when you hear him say, "Fuck, I command," it's like you can feel how many years he has dealt with the bullshit before finally snapping and saying, no, bullshit. I'm done being a coward. I'm not going to follow command's orders. We are saving those men. And you feel the motivation behind that. Or even, Christ almighty, the vengeful determination and the zealotry on the Panzer Elite missions, where it's like, Petersek Panzergruppen. It's, it's a little hammed up, but you can see, like, him going, yes, targets, you feel something. But you don't feel anything in this campaign. You just feel like there's just a generic story continuing on where none of the characters have any level of interaction. Like, none of your soldiers are interacting with one another. There's no speech or anything about one group or one other element. You just feel like you're just progressing onwards and upwards, and game announce are telling you what's going on. And then, speaking on game announcer telling you what's going on, the actual missions themselves are so disjointed that you don't really understand what the hell's going on in the first place. Like, you get these, You get these missions where you have to go behind enemy lines or defend something, and these missions can last from, 5 to 10 minutes to upwards of an hour. There's no level of, there's no real synergy between any of the missions. It just feels like a random assortment of objectives that probably you could have had less missions but more full-out story, but they probably had to have a quota for how many missions they had to have, and they were like, well, we need at least 8 missions, so let's make sure that these missions are done in the right order or whatever. Jeez, it just felt... And when you're doing them as well, the missions just cut an end at just the most random points. Like, you complete and blow something up, and then you're expecting to, go on to defend another ridge. And the game's like, no, that's it, you're done. I'm bored, let's go. Let's move on. I mean, one of the few missions that I actually liked. It was like 2 missions in total that I actually liked playing through. The first was the Tobruk mission, which ended way too early in my opinion. Because, for example, in Men of War 1, that game from 2009, that long ago, over what, like 14 years older than this game. Had an Africa campaign with actual progression, and you actually had a moment where you were attacking Tobruk, and not only did you go into the town of Tobruk, you full on took the dock and shot freighters coming in with anti-aircraft guns and Crusader tanks, basically shooting at the boats to stop them from reinforcing the British. You were literally cutting off the supply lines right in front of the Tommies before they broke and surrendered. That shit was fucking amazing. And talking about really amazing campaigns, Company of Heroes opposing France. Each mission progressed the story and the actions of the technology and capabilities like you would in any normal grand strategy game or RTS game. Like, some of you may agree with me, some of you may not, but I think a good RTS game is campaign-wise is just a kind of preparation for multiplayer. Literally, what you're doing is each particular mission is introducing to you a new mechanic. Dawn of War 1 had a perfect thing, introducing the base mechanics of the chapel barracks, the stronghold for the Space Marines, and then you had the scouts you could go invisible, and then you could use them for snipers, and then you had the next mission after that, which I think was the one where you were defending, I think, and then you got access to tanks. No, it wasn't access to tanks, that was the one afterwards. The one with the jetpacks, you could have access to them, and slowly but surely you were building up your repertoire of different... It's been a while since I played Dawn. I need to replay that game. Anyway, you build up your repertoire of gear and equipment, and then eventually, by the time you reach near the end of the campaign, where the leashes is let off, and you get to choose what strategy you get to pick. You don't fuck around with this sort of assortment of stuff that you're just thrown at you when you're playing through the game. Like, that's what really irritates me. What irritated me with this campaign is that there was no progression. It was just, here's your allotment of troops, here's your allotment of stuff. Go play. And it doesn't feel like you're making any sense of progression. You're just doing this because that's what you're supposed to do. And it doesn't make any sense. It just feels disjointed, and even though it's linear, it's not really linear. It feels like a mission maker that didn't quite have an idea as to what he wanted to do, or wasn't given enough time to flush out the tactics and the systems properly, thus resulting in you having the result that you have. Which is frankly insulting to decent games out there, because there are so much better options that are not as well known, because people keep suppressing them, or people just keep thinking, oh, it's got to be the new thing, And it's like, there are gems that are plus 15 years old that do it way fucking better. Age of Empires 2, Age of Mythology, Dawn of War. Hell, even fucking Halo Wars did a better job with its campaign than the Company of Heroes 3 did. And that's saying something. And now, the Italian campaign. If I had to summarize this Italian campaign in one sentence, it is a mess of a system with the illusion of choice. In my opinion, I disagree completely with the notion that the Italian campaign is a dynamic and sandbox experience. It's not. It is a system that has a limited form of non-linear gameplay, but it immediately railroads you back into the same direction that the entire system was on, without really giving you the sense of any real decision that you're making is anything more than just how quickly do you want to finish this. In my opinion, when it comes to, finger quote, dynamic sandbox experience, there needs to be a few quotas that to be checked off before I will agree with that statement. The first is you get to pick the faction you want to play as. The second is you get to go onto a relatively flat board that has a large enough area around it so that you can make a decision and not feel like you have to jump straight back into the same fucking decision that the game developers want you to make. And finally, there needs to be enough of a consequence to your decisions that replayability actually becomes necessary in order for you to get the full experience. Company of Heroes 3's Italian campaign has none of this. You can only play as the Americans, or the Allies in this particular respect. You don't get to really go any further out than maybe one or two provinces to the right before immediately being railroaded back into the same location. And finally, the consequences of the actions that you're choosing don't really impact anything except slow you down. Because at no point can you, unless you fuck up to the point of intense, well, basically, if you're shit at the game and you fuck up the very easy mechanics that are laid out for you, you really cannot lose. At all. It is just a slog otherwise. And that, frankly, is just kind of insulting when you realize it. Because when you have these boring... And to be fair, again, the mechanics in the game as well is already bad in arbitrary sense. Because rather than doing things in an intelligent sense that they try and aim to be, they fuck up and only allow certain things in a very black and white environment. So I'll focus on the narrative like I did first of all with the German stuff. But there are points, to briefly mention the gameplay mechanics, there are points in which a unit that is almost completely destroyed still has the capacity to somehow beat, even though it gets destroyed in the process, a unit that is not only at full health, but is veteran as well. So you'd think an inexperienced unit that is nearly destroyed, regardless of whether or not it, finger quote, counters the opposition, should still be only able to do a relative small ding, but still lose and get destroyed, thus allowing the unit that is more veteran to take maybe more of an impact than it would have if it was in a unit that was meant to counter it, but still workable, still able to do it. No, doesn't count. Like, that level of fucking arbitrary bullshit just pissed me the fuck off when that happened. Oh, we'll get to that in a minute. Or a few, depending on how long I ramble here. But no, so the campaign itself, in narrative sense, feels very fucking sanitized. Like, I appreciate that there are different writers nowadays who don't like to go through the nitty-gritty. You know, I'm not asking for something as brutal and as intense as Saving Private Ryan at a Omaha beach scene every 5 seconds with that. I appreciate that there is not a level that you need to have that. But the amount of how glorified the Allies feel at points, and how the Germans are just... Admittedly, they're not doing the arbitrary, oh, where's the Germans? We are evil. But you feel like they wanted to do that at times. That there's the clear moments of just like, the Allies are somehow incapable of doing anything wrong, except on the one or two occasions where a village or a city gets bombed, and there's not much of the village or city before it left when the Allies, finger quote, liberated. But when they do these moments, they don't feel deserved at any point, and fall flat on their face, resulting in you kind of just going, oh, fuck off. Because you don't really appreciate, like, because you don't, they're not deserving of your respect at that point. They're not deserving any notion that you are actually taking their shit seriously. You're just playing through an experience like that. And, oh my god, the characters in the bloody narrative campaign is frankly insulting. Like, you have Joe Conti and his fucking grandmother. I'm adding her as a character because the amount of times he mentions her is kind of ridiculous. And the level of attachment that Joe Conti has to his grandmother is borderline on the same level as that guy from Psycho to his mum. That is how fucking much he talks about his grandmother in all of these bloody things. And again, Joe Conti, who is obviously the character from the first game from Able Company, is now at this point he's a corporal, and for some reason being a corporal allows him to pretty much command fucking Able Company throughout the entire experience, because, you know, a sergeant or a lieutenant, or lieutenant if you're going by American standards, are apparently not a thing in this universe. Okay, weird. Again, it just doesn't make any sense. Why the fuck would a corporal be in command of a company? You know, like, maybe a small group of soldiers, but not a fucking company. But, like, the Captain McKay sort of just goes, well, you go do that thing, Corporal Conti, you run it. And I'm like, where the fuck does this come from? Where is this trust? Why are we suddenly talking with him like that? You know, there are fucking protocols in regards to this. Show some actual understanding of how the military system functions. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to convince me that this is a real life scenario or that this is a historical scenario. But forget it. Logic is right out the window with this fucking game. So, yeah, and throughout the experiences, when you're playing as Joe Conti, you are constantly just being given as a game announcer, similar to Rommel, where you get told whether or not something is going well or something's going bad, what mission objectives you've got, or anything. And throughout the experience, you just get more and more sick and tired of Joe Conti. And again, every time I heard his open his bloody mouth, I was like, oh no, you're going to say something dumb again, aren't you? Because that's the only thing that you were able to really get from any of the conversations that you had from Joe Conti and his fucking grandmother. And then, of course, you have the three generals, if you will. The British commander, the American commander, and the Italian partisan. And they obviously went for the Rommel. Rommel. No, they obviously went for the Patton and Montgomery route because the British general is speaking like this, and I am more civilized, and I am an intelligent human being who can have a cup of tea and tidio what. And then you've got the American general who's all about the action and the shooting, and I am a soldier. Lead me, follow me, or get out of my way. That kind of bullshit. And it's like, they push that initial narrative through because of how the campaign is supposedly you're a general who's going to be able to take command of both factions, and you're going to get them to work together to defeat the Germans, whose only real finger quote interaction with you, apart from obviously being the AI that you're fighting against, is the Sophia character who occasionally posts up in the turn routine. When you're changing turns and the Germans are taking turns to do stuff, you occasionally get that to stop the monotonous gameplay routes, from boring you out, I suppose. But to be fair, though, I also found it a bit frustrating that throughout the campaign, she doesn't really change her tune. Like, she doesn't ever sort of get a bit more progressively worried as the Allied forces start getting closer and closer to Rome. Or you don't get any kind of moments where her connection is interrupted by an Allied bombing or something like that. Like, that would be fucking cool, because then it would actually show that your playthrough is currently progressing. Or the fact that she doesn't mention at all about how the Allies didn't bomb the Monte Cassino thing, because that would have been a great propaganda piece. If you fuck up and blow up the Monte Cassino, as it happened in real life, they would have been all over that. The Germans would have been like, look at what they're doing to these sacrilegious places, these religious places. Clearly the Allies are the bad guys here. No, nothing to mention that at all. Missed opportunity, I guess. And so, when you're playing through the campaign, you just get, again, these moments where characters have these rare, shining moments of gold, where there is actually a reaction, a human interaction between the general and the colonel, between the British and the American commanders, who they have a moment of kindred spirit. They both suffer the issues of the war. And those moments are so few and far between where you actually feel like they did decent writing for it. But they're buried under so much monotonous, sanitized kind of content. And I keep saying sanitized because it doesn't at all bring any human aspect to the war. It's all squeaky clean. There's no such thing as war crimes. There's no such thing as vengeful spirits. No hatred of another group of whatever. It's just they're the Nazis or the Krauts, and that's about as much as they're allowed to say. There's no insult. There's no aggressiveness. There's no whatever. It's just they're the bad guys, and that's about it, really. I never felt any sense of actual humanity in this entire campaign. And as you progress through the different missions as well, you really, there doesn't seem to be any essence of change apart from the fact that at one point the generals decide, oh, we all like each other now. Out of nowhere. You get the random kindred spirit moment where you think, oh, maybe they're going to be working together. And then there'll be just a point where they're now suddenly best of buds. And I'm like, wait, what? Where was the part that I missed where they actually start really fucking liking each other? No, they're just best buds now. Okay, fair enough. Must have skipped that bit when he was doing the 2 or 3 missions in between that moment. And also, one thing I found interesting that they didn't mention, or I say interesting in a slightly annoying sense, is that they don't at all question the Italian partisans, and they don't ever sort of go, anything more than just, are you absolutely certain you want to trust this person? I think maybe the American general once mentioned about, here, well, they're not going to be the most reliable of people, and then that character just immediately, that character gets shut down, or that character doesn't, the American general sort of gets told, oh, no, they're there to fight for their people, blah, 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 and then never mentions again. So at no point is there a level of, like, we have to treat them with suspicion because there is a chance that the Italian partisans could be infiltrated by fascist-leaning sympathizers. Because, yes, I'm aware of the time of the war the Italians had surrendered and were neutral, but there were still larger groups of fascists inside the Italian areas, as well as occupied areas by Germany and allies alike. So they would have been fighting alongside. There was a lot of fucking towns that were left with booby traps. So at no point do you get that from the opposing side, which I think would have been, again, missed fucking opportunity. So the campaign, narrative-wise, just feels like no different. It just feels like, in a similar vein to the German campaign, just a case of Faction A versus Faction B, with no real sense of humanity or character development any more than what could have been the case. And, like, what would have been much better in terms of a narrative, in the terms of the Able Company, is instead of having them being constantly alongside, constantly doing shit, you could just have the same kind of interaction like you had in the game World in Conflict, which spoils for that particular campaign. But throughout the campaign, you've got two National Guardsmen who are sort of conscripted into the American Defense Unit, and you actually see them at the beginning of the campaign, if you're just playing the American side. And then throughout the American campaign, you kind of periodically see them doing some things, either fighting for someone or sitting in the background somewhere. And then eventually there's a point in which you think, oh shit, one of them might have been lost. And you think, oh shit, that's not good. That could be a bad result. And then later on, you can see that they reunite, and before they, and then at the end of the campaign, you can see that they've gone through a lot of fucking crap, a lot of shit, but they've still got throughout the entire experience, they've also been trying to get batteries. One of them has a Walkman disc player, which, God, I'm feeling old describing this. But for those who don't know, it's basically it was a device that you basically put CD-ROMs into, or CD discs for that played music and albums and stuff, and it was a portable music player that you could either hook headphones into, or if it had a speaker, I don't know. The one I had didn't have one. It was like you could play MP3s, but it didn't have a speaker. You had to have headphones for that one. But you could listen to music from it, and basically the guy was trying to find batteries throughout the entire experience of the campaign. And that had more fucking development than any of the fucking development of Company of Heroes 3, because you saw their characters go through basically the turmoil of a fucking Third World War, but still retain their humanity and enjoyment factor of the simple things. But in this, you're just constantly having the same fucking repetitive motion of, like, my grandma says this and he's doing that, and I just think it would have been far better if the leader of Able Company could actually maybe have a point where he first interacts with Joe Conti, sees Joe Conti in combat and realizes, hey, this guy might be a leader someday, decides to give him an opportunity in a small sense, maybe even have a mission where he leads a small group of soldiers, and if you do well, / you have to complete it, you then get the ability to see him rise up into the ranks, and then by the time he reaches the end of that campaign, he becomes a sergeant. That would be something more better than, well, that would be something that would be better than the slop that we got with this. Oh, and like, at no point, just try and wean off this part, at no point does any of the characters that you play feel like anything more than just the stereotypical commander of a particular faction, or stereotypical representation of a person of that time, that with all of the humanity sucked out of them as well. So that by the time you finish the campaign, you're absolutely fucking done, and you have no interest in ever looking in this direction ever again. And we haven't even mentioned the gameplay, like not to the we've mentioned a tiny fraction of it, but we haven't even touched the essences of what I fucking despise, which let's go into part 2 for that then. Moving on to the gameplay side of things, the Italian campaign has a real issue of 1 step forward, 3 steps backwards. In the sense that for every good thing that happens in a mission, or a good moment, it is often, or more likely, reliably overshadowed by some incredibly bad logic or arbitrary system, or just bad design. For example, some of the missions that you do to take an entire town have you either going after a supply dump that turns out to be wrong, which then turns out to be a sort of enemy location that you blow up, and then you leave and then don't really gain anything from it, but apparently the town is now yours to be had. It doesn't really make any logical sense from a story standpoint, but it also doesn't make any huge amount of sense from a gameplay standpoint, because, for example, the whole notion of the game itself is that you are the Allied forces liberating Italy. You have beaten the Germans in Africa. You are now on the foot, hitting the soft underbelly of the Axis. And you're now slowly but surely pushing into the different locations of Italy, whilst also encountering ever more increasingly aggressive forms of defense, and also the natural terrain being an obstacle that is forced against you. And in a majority of the missions that you do, that natural obstacles don't really factor in the combat. You either have, in terms of mission variety, the skirmish matches, which arguably are probably the main core of the actual game itself, and I kind of wish they just focused on those instead of having the arbitrary mission types that you have to have. But also, you've got certain missions that end as abruptly as they start. Like, you'll have a mission where you will need to go behind enemy lines. There's a lot of fucking sneaking missions, by the way. And you go behind the lines and you blow up these things, or you rescue a captain who's been shot down, or you've been doing this. And what happens is you go do one objective, and you're expecting to get more, and then the mission just abruptly ends. Like, you'll get a mission where you have to push into a town, and it's like, okay, so do we now have to, like, defend the town? Do we have to watch out for stuff? No, just mission's over. And it doesn't even end in a quick but logical sense. It just abruptly ends. You finish a mission, and then boom, mission complete, done. And you're just like, almost a waste of time. I think some of the missions we did were like within less than 5 to 10 minutes, and I feel like part of the reason why I was able to get them done quickly was because of the fact that I had chosen a division that had, I lucked out with the division I chose that was allowed me to spawn tanks and armor, making the mission an absolute trivial case. And that's another thing, it's not very well balanced for the types of units you bring in. You either get a mission that universally fucks your gameplay up, because depending on the division that you send into the combat zone, you either have one that completely is countered by the defenses or by the items in there, or you completely counter it. Like, there'll be a mission where you'll be going behind enemy lines to scout and do some reconnaissance, but because you took the armored detachment and they didn't factor it in, you could take your tanks with you. So you're rolling around the battlefield in this sort of supposedly very vulnerable state, blowing up every single German tank you see, because you could spawn the Persian, the Hellcats or the reinforcements. They do take some missions where the limitation of resources prevents you from getting certain units, but they still do have the ability to get those units. So if you just had the ability to salvage, or the ability to get additional kills, resources when you kill people in some divisions, you would have been able to grab them, like new armored Vics and stuff. It made some of the missions extremely easy to manage and easy to deal with. Frankly, the vibe that you get with some of the mission types and some of the mission parameters feels more like a professional, like a modder who has spent a lot of time trying to get things done, rather than the slop that we got, which was by someone who was being professionally paid to complete it. It felt rushed and lacking at the same time. So when you finally do get some actual missions which require you to take certain locations, it can become a bit of a slugfest. But and again, the rare positive moments in the campaign that occurred, you do have the rare moments of shining glory that some of the missions have. I don't really feel any missions stuck out to me in terms of, oh yeah, actually no, one mission, and that was the attack on Ortona. That mission was probably the most fun I had in the entire campaign. That mission where basically, because I'd already helped the Canucks on the far left flank, I was able to then go into the town and have support from the Canadians on that flank. That was the most fun I had in playing Company of Heroes 3's campaign, because it was the kind of mission that this game does well in, which is the slugfest style, when you have the and the freedom in which to do so. Like having some yes, okay, the terrain was limited, but I felt more free in that than it was when you were trying to be finger quote free in that realm. And it honestly just was so much more enjoyable, because you had the tanks pushing through, you had the defenses, you had to navigate through the terrain. But even that mission got fucking cut short, because right as you deal with the German counter-push, there's a fucking castle right goddamn at the end of the map, and it's like, that looks like a cool place to attack, and you don't get to attack it. You don't get to blow it up. You just push through, and then after the Germans launch their last sort of finger quote attack or counter push, you think, okay, now that you've dealt with the German counter push, you now push into what's left of the German forces in the location. And I can give you a good fucking comparison between the two. Cherbourg. The fucking mission of Cherbourg, where you basically have to push into the town and you work through the defenses. You knock out the first guns, which allows the USS Texas to shell the German positions. Then, to be fair, I feel sorry for the Germans when that happens. But when you then have shelled the German position, the Germans try and push, try and counterattack. They try and force you so that you don't cross the bridge. And then as you're pushing through, they are pushing you with as much fury and determination as they can, because they know it's their last fucking shot. And so, then after you've finally beaten back the counter pushes, you've then got the last approach, the actual main dock itself, as you're fighting through to try and deal with all of the other crap. And it's like, the sheer scale of the mission itself, it takes you time. You're slugging through it, but I love that in that respect. And as I mentioned, similar to the case of the mission from Tobruk in Men of War, you're fighting all the way up to the last sort of sector, and that to me feels far more fulfilling as a mission than ever you did when it comes to the originals, like when it comes to the stuff that we got in Vanilla Company of Heroes 3, which is what we've got here, where the mission just ends once it gets bored or once it thinks you've done enough. And it's like, no, you could do more. You could arguably shrink the amount of mission type battles into a smaller amount and just have more skirmishes, which again I think would actually benefit the campaign rather than not. And you could instead have longer mission-based stuff, which incorporates a bunch of objectives rather than in one mission template, rather than the scattering of barely spread items over a fucking loaf of content. Just scraped as much as you could possibly do, so that way then God only knows how much you could actually have fun-wise in that respect. It's honestly a bullshit thing. And talking about bullshit, I am going to fucking mention two solid factors which fucked me off more than ever possibly before. The first is, I briefly mentioned earlier, is the whole arbitrary black and white situations with the divisions. So the divisions themselves are very limited in their rates. Literally, it's rock, paper, scissors. Infantry beat tanks, tanks beat artillery. And then that's it, effectively. You've got the mishmash of the different style of units, but in a sense, it's literally just that. So, tanks also beat other tanks to a smaller extent, but really you want the infantry. But, that's about it. And the game does not ever account in any different circumstances than the unit type that is engaging it. So there are points in the campaign where I actively attacked a very weakened unit of tanks or artillery, and whose health and organization was so low they didn't have any bonuses, because as your organization in your army lowers, your abilities in the battle is reduced, obviously to simulate your wear and tear. But for some reason, again, also the amount of times that you didn't have a random skirmish match in that respect is, again, really fucking dumb. Like, I'd rather have the system that they have in Warno, where if you encounter someone, and you fight a tactical battle or auto-resolve. Like in Rome Total War, a game that came out 20 fucking years ago, you had the ability to, whenever you encountered your opponent, go zoom right into the map itself, where it would dynamically show the terrain that was around your army at the fucking time that you arrived on the scene. 20 fucking years ago they did this, guys. 2 years before First Company of Heroes was invented, by the way. And you could fight over the area in particular. Now, I'm not saying that they would... I appreciate that it's not an easy thing to make a series of maps and stuff that has generic environmental things. I'm not asking for the same levels of realism, however much I would appreciate that kind of thing. I'm just asking that you make a simple series of maps, kind of like the skirmish maps that you've got in the fucking game at the time, to be used as part of the fucking system. Kind of like the shit from Osfront, by the fucking by. And that fucking game has a far more dynamic campaign than Company of Heroes 3 ever could fucking dream of, by the way. I'll get to that in a second. So, you could have that instead, and that, in my opinion, would be far fucking better. Because rather than having this arbitrary bullshit that we had, where despite a unit of armor or tanks or infantry being at the most pitifully minuscule levels of health, that they couldn't possibly do anything if they come to attack and do whatever, for some reason when I go to finish them off, with whatever unit I could choose, I had to make sure to choose the right unit, otherwise the unit that I would attack with this force would immediately take a huge fucking dent of a battle. Like, they would take more than 50% casualties. It wouldn't matter if they were veteran, it wouldn't matter if they were buffed or anything. Nope, they would take more than 50% casualties and withdraw, losing the battle, but destroying the opponent in the process. In what fucking reality, then, is that a fucking loss? I'm sorry, you could say, oh yeah, but they might have done a last stand. No, if you fucking lose the battle, as in you die in the process of defending a location, the enemy army doesn't then just decide, you know what, I'm gonna run away too. It has the same fucking logic as it would be when I was in fucking Rome Total War with the units that would fight furiously, beat the opponent, but because they took just a tiny bit more fractional casualty, the AI would then decide, run! You know, and they would run away in the middle of the battle, or at the end of the battle. So I'd get the victory thing with our commander basically praising the men, saying, all of Rome will be cheering, the day is ours, and then there'd be a random unit in the background saying, flee for your lives, we've won the day, the enemy has been beaten, but we took a casualty too much, and runs the fucking way like a coward. You know, like, for fuck's sake, that logic is so retarded, it's not even real. Just they could have had something simple that says, if Unit A is more than 95% stronger, i.e. has more health, has veterancy or something, and you're facing an army that's less than 10% strength, shouldn't fucking matter. I will take a 50 or a 30 or 40% dent, but still have the victory, because it's like, okay, if you want to use the right unit, fine, less impact to you, but at least you win and you can take the location. Or, if you choose the wrong type of unit, oh yeah, you take a dent, you're going to take a lot of impact, whatever, but you still take the location. But if you choose the right unit, they're like, oh, you know what, you don't take as much damage because you chose the right fucking unit. But it just feels like, whenever I see that, I just imagine some petulant fucking idiot saying, no, you're an infantry unit against an artillery tank. The artillery does a big gun, and you're an infantry. You're supposed to be a tank. That's why you run away. It's like, fuck you. Just fuck fuck you and your stupid fucking logic, because you don't have the capacity to have any more intelligence to realize a fucking artillery piece is a big gun that needs people to fight for it. And if you've killed the gunners, it's a goddamn piece of static artillery. Oh, retarded wankers who play this game. Oh, anyway, getting more angry at this point, but I'm just going to keep going through. The other thing that really fucks me off about this particular game, and the thing that genuinely got me pissed, was the point of the air forces. So, one of the things I will go into a nice smile about is the support systems in this game. I like the fact that you can capture different locations and they can offer you bonuses and options, and I like the concept of being able to use the airports to provide bombing support, reconnaissance, and that sort of thing. And I liked how the villages as well, you could use to support it, and you could actually do quite a lot if you had a good level of levels of support. Like if the partisan ITIs liked you a lot, that's fair enough. But here's the thing: one of the things that really fucked me off about the air forces is that, in order to, obviously because, with all things, bombers have range, fighters have range, and all that jazz. But if you wanted to maneuver your forces, like move your bomber forces up, you have to spend resources to do so, which is actually quite expensive. Actually, it's 50 fuel to move your bombers up to a different airfield. And that's ridiculous. That's quite a lot of fucking resources to commit to just moving a fucking bomber. However, one of the things that also happens at the same time when you decide, at one point in the campaign, to sort of to set the scenario, we'd been bombing and using the bombers and been doing all things. The B-25 is an absolute class, and it worked all perfectly. So I used the bombers, and we'd advanced the front, and I realized that I'm actually quite a distance behind, and I now need to move the bombers up. So in order for me to move the bombers up, I'd have to move them twice, because for some fucking reason, in addition to charging me a fuck ton of resources to move the bastards, you then tell me that there's a limited amount of range as well. So in order to get the bombers to go to the front where I'd secured the location, I'd end up having to move them twice, which would be the same amount as buying a fucking new bomber. And it's like, what? I have to fucking pay the same amount of price to move a bomber as it would be just to fucking craft a new one. And here's the best part. I'm like, fuck that. Why the fuck would I need to waste so much resources? It would be far better if I, cha-ching, fucking salvage the damn things and use the money that I get, the oil that I got from that, the resources I got from that, to then fucking put the new bombers into place. The logic in that the retarded sense of design in that regard. It's like, if I'm going to be having a limited range to move my bombers around, don't you fucking dare charge me a fucking penny to move the bombers. Give me an action turn delay or something like that. Like, if I can't move my bombers the entire distance away, then fucking make it so that it's free, so that it's just time that I lose, so that if I wanted to attack, I couldn't because my bombers were on the way. Or if that I am to have a charge, don't you dare put a fucking limit on the range of where my bombers can move to in order for me to be able to access that. Because that then simulates me fucking moving an entire army unit up to the front. Just, oh my god. It's because the thing is, you can actively fucking counter it with I'll just scrap the unit then, because there's no fucking point in keeping something if it costs you the same amount and some just to fucking have it in another location without having to fucking skip it. Like, what fucking idiot designed that? Seriously. And like also the consequences as well. So going into like the actual campaign mechanics, you get the whole point of the whole general and the ITI and the British thing is that you get to choose between the three commanders what you favour more, and the which one you decide to pick will have the abilities and the bonuses for that one being given to you. But the thing is, you don't really have to worry about, finger quote, the choice, as it were. Literally, all it is you go through the campaign missions. You will get those fucking characters up to the top without any one of them getting fucked over in the process. At no point in the campaign was there a risk that I might fuck one of them off so much that they decide not to help me, or that they don't give me any of the bonuses or anything. Like, I never had to balance any of the things. I just had to just do what I did in the campaign. Just complete the missions, go and take the towns and do whatever, and it naturally improved. At no point did I feel like any of my choices, finger quote, had consequences. It just was there. You played through the campaign. None of this, finger quote, dynamic sandbox campaign actually has any hallmarks or any traits of the dynamic or sandbox element to it. It just felt like a semi-linear campaign, akin to what you would get in Company of Heroes 2's Battle of the Bulge, where you can... Actually, no, there's more fucking consequences of the Battle of the Bulge than this piece of shit campaign. It just, in comparison to any other environment, this thing fails and pales so much. And it just is an embarrassment, to say the least. And the fact that they then try and get you to feel that this is a campaign of, you know, repetitiveness or repeatability or replayability with the dynamic choices and the dynamic... No, it's not. It's your first attempt at it's a modder's first attempt at a dynamic campaign, and it fucking shows. It really fucking shows. And the fact that they ended up having to add... in an after patch, the ability for you to stop your units from having to request orders every fucking time after the game's release just shows how inexperienced they were with that kind of mechanic. Because why would they need to force the units to request you to put them on standby in the first place? No, it's... And again, all of these criticisms and frustrations that I encountered weathered down the experience to the point when whenever something good happened, it would always be overshadowed by something incredibly bad, or really frustrating, or tedious, or annoying. And by the time I ended up finishing the campaign, I was so fucking done with it. I was so pissed off with it. I was so angered by it that I'm like, no, fuck you. I'm not even giving you the decency of sitting and watching through the credits, because all it would show me is that these amount of people do not know how to fucking design a game properly, or were more likely in the case put through a fast rigmarole of bullshit who didn't get given the opportunity to make a full game properly. Oh boy, yes. Well, now let's talk about more positive things. We'll try and bring it back into a state of positivity. So obviously, since the game's launch, Relic has gone independent and have attempted to make a number of DLCs, as well as release content to try and fix things and to go whatever. And though their community is small, they're giving it a chance. And I'm not going to, and props where props are due, they are trying. They are doing updates, they are doing DLCs. I don't think they're going around the DLCs personally in the right way. They are very expensive. And the value of the DLC in comparison to what we're seeing with other titles is not that great. I feel like there's probably a level of they're kind of forced to do this sort of thing for the pricing, because obviously there are other things that are in play that could potentially, they probably would like to make it cheaper, but they actually need to make it, worthwhile in that respect. But it still, unfortunately, doesn't quite. I don't know. I don't personally see the value in the DLCs, primarily because when you see what they are offering for the price that they are offering them for example, the latest DLC to come out, the Endure and Defy, you get 4 battle groups, which is good, and they are having custom assets. Again, that's a good thing. Props where they're in that realm. It does have differences in terms of options and gameplay loops, and there are new unit rosters and everything. So that is good, and there are apparently a number of free maps as well as a result of that. But I don't think it's worth almost 20 quid for it. Considering, in comparison, you've got the game Call to Arms, Gates of Hell Offront, which, in that, a DLC that is around $16.99 is an entire faction with its own set of campaign missions. You've got Scorched Earth, which is $12.99, and that gives you a fuck ton of basically a bunch of missions, custom unit assets, and additional, almost an additional extra faction on top of that. Liberation, which is the admittedly listed at £24.99, but it gives you the entire fucking American Army roster, and not only that, but campaigns in both Normandy, in Germany, and in Normandy, France, and then later on Germany. Then you have a 11 quid DLC, which has Easy Company and the airborne operations in Market Garden as well. And it's like, in comparison to that, the Company of Heroes DLCs, which there's only 4 of them. One of them is worth, all of them, the Enduring Defy, the Fire and Steel, 20 quid's worth. The offerings are easily, the offerings aren't even worth comparing. And of course, we've now got the new DLC, which at the time of the recording, Finest Hour, is due to be released in about, almost a few hours. I think I want to say it's releasing in about 4 hours, 5 hours. Yeah, 5 hours at the time of this recording. So by the time this video comes out, it will have released, and I will probably put a note in the comment, pinned comment, stating the amount of money for this. But this actually has a full-on faction a new faction in the game with as many vehicles, if not more than, being added to the game that were in the original roster of Gates of Hell. And not only do we have these DLCs, the paid part of it, you also have the free content that's been coming in afterwards. There's a giant juxtaposition in terms of content development, and the guys who have been doing this have the same kind of elements of budgeting and capacity and numbers of staff or whatever, but they have a lot more passion and craft for the project, and you can really tell. So when it comes to Company of Heroes 3, I'm gonna, props where props are due. I hope that Company of Heroes can bring it back and to do well. But what they do, the way they're going about it at the moment, it's really hard not to just think it's kind of pants. It really is. I am sorry. But aside of that, things that could be done, or things that they could have done, or could do for the future, if they do have a future, is increase the modability of their game. Company of Heroes 3 has the potential, with its modding community, to make absolutely incredible gameplay loops and incredible levels of content if they would just let the modders do something about it. I mean, for example, one of the mod that you're watching at the moment is the Spearhead mod. This mod is basically an improvement over it's basically what I can only play this game as in terms of a fun factor, because the gameplay allows the vehicles and even armored vehicles, the tanks versus the armored vehicles, they have a dynamic sense now. It's not so much rock, paper, scissors in a vanilla sense where an M3 Stuart basically can take over an entire map for a while. It actually can do really well until someone with a pack gun shoots it once and it goes kaboom, like it would in real life, or you have an armored car with a machine gun. That in the Spearhead mod is actually quite a frightening concept, because you have all of the infantry scattering to the hills, trying not to get blown to smithereens, whilst attempting to get some kind of anti-tank weapon to them. Infantry are far more glassy, but they have the potential to do some incredible damage. You get a unit with a couple of rocket launchers and put them in a defensively strong position, they can take out most armored vehicles. In fact, near the end of some games, even the Tiger, the Pershing, all of these supposedly fearsome tanks and armored vehicles are buggered because of infantry with rocket launchers. The amount of times I've been in a mission where I've barely kept my shit together because one or two squads of mine have been able to knock out the enemy tanks with the rocket launchers. They'll severely fuck the insides. They'll do whatever. And it means then that at no point is there a one type of tactic beats all. Depending on your particular preference and playstyle, you can end up having some incredibly epic and awesome engagements like you've been seeing throughout this entire video. I'll put a link down below into the description for that mod as well, because I honestly do recommend it. It's a lot of fun to play, and it makes the experience that much more satisfying when playing against the AI or playing against with your friends. And obviously, you can download the other sort of mod capabilities to increase the units, the capacity of your troops, and all of that sort of jazz. And like that side of Company of Heroes, the skirmish side and everything else, that's good. That is honestly good. Having the different map modes and everything, really good. I like this. This is a good sign. This is the kind of shit we should have had from day one. It should have been like this, because we then finally were able to get the kind of gameplay that we wanted to have, which is actually fucking good quality content. People having the ability to deal with that. It just, at the moment, it just feels so out of touch and out of whack in the vanilla sense. But with the Spearhead, it all makes sense. The units, the rosters, the gameplay, the whole thing, it just works in a fun, enjoyable, chaotic manner, which was what Company of Heroes really should be about. So it just when it comes to dealing with that, outside of that, it just feels like just a bit of a mess, really. I say mess. The skirmish mode is the only sort of good thing that comes as part of it, like the multiplayer maps and everything, and I feel that's probably where a majority of the development was put into, like, once again, making another fucking esports out of a real-time strategy game instead of just having a fun game to work from. So, anyway, long story short, how do we fix this? Well, one thing that could have been done, and I mentioned this in the campaign, but I think I honestly would love to see this in the series more, is an actual, an option where you can create a dynamic campaign where you can, you select the faction and you can play out, like in Call to Arms Gates of Hell Ostfront, where you have the dynamic campaign, you select the faction, you select what pace you want it at, and I hope at some point in the future they improve the option to choose from early, mid, or late war, so that way you can get started a lot faster, or not, depending on how you want to research it. And then you can enjoy having the abilities to play your faction at any particular point in this conflict. Or in this case, for Company of Heroes, you could select how many command points you have, how much your population's going to be, how many towns you think should be in this environment. Like, actually make it a randomized environment so that you have that replayability. Maybe have a campaign edition thing mode where it's like, hey, if you're doing this for the first time, complete this first, and then you can have fun with the dynamic shit. That would encourage replayability. But instead, what we have is just this linear shit. So, no, have that. And better still, allow mods to be part of the campaign. Play the original campaign with the Spearhead mod would be so much more fun. Because now, in addition to having to deal with the German forces pushing up or counter-attacking or whatever, you now have to be able to deal with the mechanics of Spearhead, where a battle defense can last for God knows how long, because you've been slowly but surely, been whittled down because the Germans or the Allies, depending on what faction you're playing, have been counteracting your tactics, or they've been bringing up a strong force to push into your region. And again, another thing, you should be able to play as the fucking Germans. I'm not glorifying any particular faction over the other. I just like the ability to choose, having the choice, being able to play the game that I want to play in the way that I'd like to play it. I like playing as the Germans in these games because I find that faction more interesting than the Allies. I find the technology, the equipment, I like that stuff. I've been playing Company of Heroes for fucking 10, 12, 15 years, and a majority of the time it's been playing as the Germans, because the Germans had the cool shit at times. Just from the gameplay side of things. And the choice I have in that would be nice to offer. Same if I was playing Warno and I was playing the Russians, because I like sometimes playing as the Russians. You have the choice, rather than not have the choice in this respect. So no, I just think so to kind of bring things to a sort of summary of this endeavor, this campaign and the German campaign before it feels like a rush, and again, an illusion of choice. The first campaign, the German campaign, is just the German campaign is just a a piss poor attempt at creating a linear sort of honoring a legacy that would have been far better spent just putting the missions and the development time into the the Italian campaign, and then then that way you would have had more options in terms of, and better quality of life in terms of story or character development or anything. And then the actual Italian campaign, the potential it would have had to make the potential to make it as good as it could have been, there could have been a better chance for that. But instead, we just got a faux freedom of will or freedom of choice or faux dynamic finger quote mission templates, which really was just a semi-linear campaign with an alternating path that redirects itself back into the center, resulting in an incredibly frustrating and tedious experience that just grinds on until the inevitable conclusion, which is the end of the campaign, which feels cut short anyway. Like, you see a bunch of buildings and a bunch of targets and stuff, which I had access to way before the actual campaign finished. Like, there was a good couple of episodes where I could have just gone from Anzio straight over to Rome. I was within Rome. I could have taken Rome, but the game put an invisible wall in front of it. And it just, at that point, it just felt like it was just eeping itself into an exhaustive state before finishing. And frankly, I don't blame it. It just feels completely worthless in terms of time spent. Again, I'm happy that I've done it. I'm never playing it again because I would rather fucking pull my nails out than have to go through it again. I honestly wish Company of Heroes, I wish Relic all the best in terms of their development. I hope that Company of Heroes can become a decent franchise once again without the issues of executives and poor management decisions. But in all honesty, if you want an actual good real-time strategy game set during the Second World War, and I say real-time strategy, it's more like real-time tactics, but at this point, there's no real choice in the matter. Play your Call to Arms finest out. Play that. Like, I'm not even sponsored. I'm just saying that if you want to enjoy a real-time strategy game with tactics, with choice options and everything else, Call to Arms Gates of Hell Ostland has campaigns aplenty, skirmishes aplenty, replayability aplenty. And it just does not see... And the content is still coming on strong. We've got new missions, new maps, new game modes. Modding community is as flowing, as strong as ever, if not more so. We've got new game types. We've got stuff from previous games being implemented. The fucking zombie game modes that everyone seems obsessed with. You get to play as different factions and not get condemned by every 5 seconds by the developers. You just do all these things because it's a fun game. The developers get it. It's what makes that game fun. And call me biased, but when you've been playing a good game for so long and then you have to play a crap game for a while, it just highlights just how good the good game is. No matter what the flaws are of Call to Arms, I know that the majority of the time I'm enjoying myself playing it. Anyway, I've been attempting to record this and playing through for so long now. I'm done. So thank you all very much for watching this probably near hour-long video. And I hope you have enjoyed the campaign as much as you could. And I've enjoyed the campaign at moments for it as well. And we will close this chapter by saying this is Mr. Jaeger signing out. Have a good one, guys.